Hi everyone, my name's Lee. This is my second podcast that I've been thinking. Joined today by John Borland, who's a coach, a speaker, an author and a podcaster. He's also an ex-football player, but we weren't going to mention that, but I've done it anyway.
Fair play, mate.
We're going to be speaking about the ego today, so I just thought I'd throw that in there and maybe feed a bit of your ego, John. I don't know. Maybe he's done that.
No.
Great stuff,
the
mate.
footballer thing doesn't massively, but anyway, I get where you're going with that.
Yeah, spot on, buddy. I'm going to steal something from your podcast. So John's got his own podcast. It's well worth listening to as well. It's a brilliant podcast, the John Borland podcast. You've done like 100, and is that 120 episodes or something now, John? Right?
Yeah, do you know what? Something in that region.
Like
I genuinely don't know,
yeah.
mate. Something in that region, though. Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, I just say after if you listen to this one, give John's a listen as well. It's brilliant. 3 questions, John. Stealing them from you, but I've chosen my own questions. The first question is, what's your greatest achievement?
Oh, mate, that is a brilliant question, and a simple question, but brilliant. It's this really tricky one to answer, if I'm honest. But I probably think this sounds a bit twee, actually. But because obviously there's things like my kids are an amazing achievement, things like that, blah blah blah. But if I'm honest, I probably think my greatest achievement is my marriage.
Yeah,
I genuinely think that's my greatest achievement. Particularly in this day and age, I think it's a challenge to make a life with somebody, like a really happy, quality life with somebody. And I know it takes 2 people, so it's not just my greatest achievement.
Yeah.
My wife's been a huge contributor to that. But I think if you'd have said to me when I was younger, this is the relationship you can have in your 40s, and you can be with this person we've been together 20 odd years now, I'd have snapped your hand off for it, because I genuinely think probably 95% of our happiness, I think, because everything else sort of stems from that, I think. So probably my greatest achievement is my marriage, I would say.
It's a great one, that. It's brilliant. Yeah, because like you're saying, in this day and age, we hear it all the time, don't we? Especially in Hollywood and that, of these marriages breaking down.
Yeah.
What do you feel?
It's easy to. It's easy to end them, isn't it? So what I mean is, it's not like 100 years ago or something where you were just expected to stay married and there was no kind of outlet, or, like escape route or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's easy to end marriages. That sounds really flippant. But what I mean is, you can end a marriage if you want to. So I think it makes it even more of a choice to stay together.
Yeah.
It's almost more of a conscious decision. So. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because people will then talk about being smug married, and I'm definitely not smug married. I'm definitely not like a kind of, oh, look at us, we're married and dead happy. Yeah. We've worked and grafted for what we've got. It's not Cupid didn't hit us with arrows and then it all happened by accident. We've created what we've got, and I'm the lucky part for me is that luckily I've got someone else who's as committed to it as I am. And there's a bit of good fortune involved in that, but there's also a lot of graft and work, I think. So
yeah, you've said that before about the graft and the work side of it.
Yeah.
Brilliant one, man. I really like that one. Really, really like it. Just going to the other side of it then. What's your biggest fear?
Oh, that's a great question. Probably being really successful is my greatest fear.
Wow, okay.
That sounds a bit weird.
Yeah.
But I'm really all right with failure. Like, I can cope with that. I've coped with it before. I can handle it. I know it's all right. I think, I definitely used to fear being successful. I think I fear other people's crap that comes with being successful. Do you know what I mean? That's what I fear. I don't like being put on pedestals. Don't like people treating me differently because I might have achieved something or done something. So it's probably not even me or the success thing. It's probably more I fear having to deal with other people's responses if they see me as successful.
Yeah.
That bit, because I find that really like, I don't know. I just struggle with it.
That feels connected to somehow to ego. Actually, what we're going to be talking about.
It probably is.
Yeah, it does. It feels that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Great
it probably
answer.
Is.
Brilliant answer.
Yeah.
Really good. And you probably wouldn't get that answer from many people, would you?
No, yeah, maybe not. I think, I suppose I've done a lot of thinking around things like this, though. Yeah. So, not that I haven't had that question posed to me in years. And probably all my other fears were attached to other people.
Yeah.
So, do I fear death? Not particularly death itself. Do I fear maybe leaving my kids alone or in the lurch or feeling like, you know what I mean? I probably fear other people having to deal with traumas and difficulties and challenges than I do myself, if I'm honest. It's probably more, I probably have more of a fear for my loved ones having to experience things that I'd like to rescue and save them from.
Yeah, kind of stuff that's out of your control, maybe, stuff that's not.
Yeah, it's probably that. So when it comes to me, fear of success is probably my biggest fear, yeah.
Wow. Love that one, that's great. Thank you. Last question. What's your biggest inspiration? What has been the biggest inspiration for you?
People I know. I know. So I'm not one, I said this on my wedding day, actually. I'm not really interested in celebrity, famous culture stuff. I'm really genuinely not that bothered about it. Yeah. There's people out there that I respect and admire and, things like that. But really, for me, my inspiration's like the day-to-day people, the ones who are handling things and you just wouldn't know, or they're making things work, they're finding a way when that way's been really difficult for them and blocked. And, I take great inspiration from the way my wife dealt with cancer diagnosis was amazing. Mm-hmm. My best mate at the minute is going through that as well. Yeah. He's unbelievably inspiring, the way he's dealing with that. I just think I've met people who've lived in abject poverty and found a way, and people who've lived with unbelievably traumatic events. And so for me, it's almost like everyday people, like I love all that. Love all that. I just think, I think that's where the real heroes are found, in that everydayness. So
I totally agree with that one. Is that why on your podcast then you always choose people don't you?
Yeah, that's my rule, mate. Yeah. That is my rule on my podcast, that I'm not having anyone on it that I haven't met in real life. I have to have least have met them in real life. That's my rule. Yeah. I don't know. I just, for me, I want it to be real and honest and normal. I find everyday people that I come across more inspiring than I do, I don't know, like Hollywood stars. There's just nothing. Yeah. Even if people pose me the question like, who would I most like to meet? It wouldn't be somebody who, and even if it said a famous person, it'd be someone who's famous but obscurely famous. Yeah. Do you know, like they wouldn't be a. Yeah. I'm not that bothered about sitting down with people. I get it. They do, somebody might be a really talented actor or a really talented singer, and I'm like, great, you're good at what you do. But there's a really talented plumber that lives in my village. Mm. Do you know, like you just happen to do a different job. Do you know, like it's okay. I admire your talents. That's amazing. But I'm not convinced about the hero worshipping of people who just. Jonathan Edwards, a triple jumper, said it years ago, didn't he? He said, the reason I'm famous is that people, because I happen to be good at hop, skipping and jumping into a sand pit. And people, for some reason, in our day and age, admire people that can jump further into a sandpit than anyone else. And it's you just think, it's true, isn't it? In that sense, that because we've decided these things, movies and music and blah, whatever, sports, they're the popular things. Mm. Those people get adorned with stardom and fans coming out their ears, and yet someone else who's brilliant at something else gets none of that adulation. So I find that really fascinating.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I really like that. Really, really like that. Great stuff. Thank you, John. Ego. What does it mean to you? What is it?
It's an interesting one, this, isn't it? And obviously there's debate about this, and the word ego means different things to different people. So we probably should unpack that a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
Obviously, Sigmund Freud wrote about ego. It's interesting, this, though, because actually he wrote in German, so he wrote ich as in I, and then his translator used the Latin translation of the word I to call it ego.
Yeah.
So he wasn't actually calling it ego as we now know it. He was saying that he was calling it the I, like as in I.
Wow. Okay.
But obviously he wrote ich, and then the translator who translated it from German into English decided to use the Latin word for I, which is ego.
Yeah.
And obviously Freud's thinking was that the ego is the part of us that like balances between our animal instincts and our kind of like over rule bearing, righteous, holier than thou kind of critical part of ourselves. And the ego kind of negotiates between those two things for us. In more like sort of Greek philosophy, Stoicism, get into Buddhism, things like that, different. The ego's seen much more as, and this is probably where it, in common language, this is probably where it comes out. It's seen much more as the sort of egotistical part of us. Do you know, the sort of, the part of us that is very proud or can't take criticism or, do you know, that kind of part of us. So when I'm talking about ego, I'm not really talking about Freud's version of ego.
Yeah.
Talking more about that.
The Buddhist kind of,
version of ego, really.
And I mean, I did John's coaching course, so John Borland's coaching course last year, wasn't it? And we did a session on ego, and I've always thought of it as the Freud's version. Didn't really think of it as kind of the Buddhist type of version, that it's not all about this kind of narcissistic look at ourselves. It's about everything else in it, our own kind of things that hold us back as well. And as we were doing that session, I didn't feel comfortable at all. Like, I really didn't think, because I didn't think I had an ego. Or I did. I knew I had a bit of an ego, but not like this quite a big ego, actually.
I think that, Lee, though, is because the way ego's portrayed to us, when you think of ego, well, I don't know about everyone else, but I used to think of ego. I would think of a sort of Donald Trump, Simon Cowell, Piers Morgan type figure. So these sort of like powerful, arrogant men, do you know, like who were kind of, I know what I'm on about. I'm in charge. I'm going to say it like this. I'm not listening to anyone else. That kind of feel to it. Do you know, those type of characters? Yeah. We think of those sort of like a suited businessman getting out of a Lamborghini, do you know what I mean? Who's got like a young pretty girl on his arm, and he's got £1 million in his pocket. That's what we sort of associate with that kind of ego thing.
Do we associate with that because these are the people that we see in the media? Because if you're the other end of the spectrum, somebody who's self-doubting, they're going to be less likely to be in the media, aren't they, surely, than the people that have the power and the money and...
Yeah, maybe, but then I think ego, there's no gender to it. I think male or female or anything in between have ego.
Yeah.
I think ego presents itself in much more ways than just the idea of like power and money and status. That's one of the ways I think it presents itself. But I think it can present itself in lots and lots of other ways. And this is where I think lots of people think they don't have an ego, or certainly don't have a big ego, because they're not into status, money, power. And yet they probably have just as big an ego, but their ego presents itself or manifests itself in a completely different way. Let me give you an example. Yeah, so like my belief with ego is that our ego really is not the real us. That's what I believe. It's not the real me. But my ego is a part of me, a part of self, if you like, that I've developed and grown over the years. So it's like, what's the word for it? Like, it's a constructed part of myself, if you like. I don't think I was born with it. I've constructed it. And the reason I've built that ego is for two purposes. One is my ego is obsessed with promoting itself, making itself look better, or protecting itself.
Okay.
Like protecting itself from any demise or criticism or harm or et cetera, et cetera. So I think our ego's in two states constantly, either in protect mode or promote mode. And loads of different people have kind of written about this. Eckhart Tolle, or Tolle, however you want to call him, he's written quite extensively about this. So some of my thinking comes a little bit from, different things that he said and different things that I've picked up. But I think we've all got an ego that we've constructed, if you like. We didn't know we were doing it, but we did it. And I do think we constructed that ego because we thought it served us in some way. And some people would say our ego does serve us, and I'm like, okay, I can sort of see that a little bit, maybe. But predominantly, I think our ego is a bit of a nightmare for us. I think it's a bit of a stitch up. I think it stops us being our real self. I think it makes decisions for us. It leads us down paths we wouldn't want to go. I think it holds us back. I think it makes us avoid certain things. Because I think your and mine ego's greatest fear is its own demise. Yeah. Which is why it's constantly trying to promote itself or constantly trying to protect itself. So let me give you an example. We think of ego as being that rich, arrogant, successful businessman. Let me give you a very simple example. Somebody's coming around your house and they call unexpectedly, and your house is a bit of a tip. It's a bit untidy. So you very quickly run round and try and tidy up and throw things up the stairs and make it look a bit more presentable. Why do you do that? You do that, that's an ego response, because your ego is bothered what that person might think of you because you've got an untidy house. So your ego's desperately trying to avoid any sense, not that they would come in and criticise you,
no,
but your ego's trying to avoid. This is where it's in kind of protect mode. It's trying to protect itself from any perceived sense of criticism from another person. Because your ego's really bothered what other people think of you. Like, really bothered. It's really concerned what other people think of you, which is why it's often trying to promote yourself in a really good way and protect yourself from any kind of criticism or harm as well. So that, like, really little thing that you would not really associate with someone with a big ego is potentially a big ego response.
Yeah. It makes sense, doesn't it? It makes sense to me, though. Yeah, it does make sense. Do you think these people in society then, and I was thinking this the other day of the Amish community in America, in the States, of how they cut themselves off from society in a way. Like you said, everyone's got an ego. What do you think their ego, or what do you feel their ego would be like in terms of it? Because they haven't got that media. It feels like today, what I'm trying to get is, feels like today that maybe the media's bigger than ever.
So the interesting thing is the countercultural response, and this is the real challenge with it. And this is the problem is, two people's actions, one could be ego-driven, one could be coming from like a really pure place, and they're, so for example, giving to charity. Yeah. One person could be giving to charity because they're like, I really just want to help. And the other person could be giving to charity, maybe because they want to help, but also it makes them look good. Yeah. So one could be an ego response, one couldn't be. Somebody cutting themselves off from modern society could be someone who's going, I genuinely prefer this lifestyle and it works for me, and this is what I think creates happiness and is good and blah, blah, blah. Whereas what can happen in those types of cultures is that then the ego isn't so worried about the labels and the brands and the money and the flash cars. It becomes more concerned about being more spiritual, or being more holy, or living a life of much more hardship, like almost being a martyr. Yeah. Does that make sense? So it's almost like your ego then in that culture could potentially be about who looks the most spiritual or the most holy, or does that make sense? So even like who's the poorest and who's the one who's gone without the most, like who's been the most self-sacrificing, that could be what then drives your ego in that, because that's what would get you kudos in that type of culture. So I don't think wherever you go, whatever you do with humans, you could put them on desert islands ego would probably still be involved.
Yeah,
To
so there's
some
no...
degree, it might
So
just
even with the
manifest itself
media, that's never... I suppose with the media then, that's... Ego's always been there, even 100, 200 years ago.
always there.
It's always been there.
Yeah, always there. Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's interesting what you were saying about that purpose thing. It's like that Viktor Frankl quote, isn't it, about of the... I did write it down somewhere. I've got it here, actually. So he said, for success like happiness cannot be pursued, it must ensue, and is an unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself. I mean, it's part of the quote. It's quite a long quote, isn't it?
It's good though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really good. I remember you told me about that, and I've read his book, and it's amazing. So Viktor Frankl was a Jew in the war, was captured, ended up in Auschwitz. Managed to survive it and got out the other side, which is amazing in itself, isn't it? But yeah, just a kind of this view of not kind of looking at that kind of narcissistic view of yourself, gaining things for you. It's a bit like when people say, when they look at the natural world and they say, they look at it in the eyes of a human being and go, what's the point in a wasp?
Yeah, that's ego.
What's the point in a wasp? Like, what is the point in a wasp? It doesn't give us honey. It goes around stinging people. What does it do?
That's ego, isn't it?
Yeah, what does it do for us? It doesn't matter, does it? What it does for us, it's...
No matter what it does for us, no. That's yeah. So that in and of it, even that whole idea that we as human beings, you have more right than anybody or anything else to live on the planet or to have space or whatever it is. That's like an ego thing as well.
Yeah.
How does it, in some way, like, well, how does this wasp serve me?
Yeah.
It ain't about serving you.
Yeah.
You know, like that. But that's an ego response. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. 100%.
So even the old idea of, do you know, when people go, something really bad's happening at part in the world, and they go, "Well, I'm not bothered, it don't affect me." I'm like, that's quite an ego response. Because the ego's only bothered about me, myself, and I.
Yeah.
That's what it's bothered about. And it's bothered about the promotion and protection of that. And if there's nothing to protect itself from, well, I'm not really interested then in what's happening there. That's got nothing to do with me. That can be quite an ego response as well. Our ego loves promoting itself. So it's our ego that makes us do them like really good first impressions when we know it's not really us, but we fake it a little bit and we take our really best self to an initial meeting or out on a date or whatever it is. It's our ego that's scared of like other people finding out some of our flaws or the chinks in our armour. Or so your ego doesn't like being vulnerable at all. Does not like being vulnerable. Don't really like sharing about some of the stuff you struggle with at all. Really doesn't like that because, again, when it's in protect mode, it doesn't want to do that. So it'll try and keep all that to itself, etc., etc. Your ego loves it, loves a compliment. Loves a compliment. So somebody compliments you on something, you're absolutely buzzing about it.
Yeah.
Your ego's buzzing about it. Somebody criticises your ego, hates that. It's not having it at all. Struggles with criticism. So you can see your ego in like so many little tiny ways in your day-to-day life. And if you start to think about decisions that we make based on our ego, people literally buy houses because their ego tells them it makes them look better if they do. People buy cars, they buy clothes, people do careers and get themselves job titles because it promotes their ego in some way. Yeah. People also don't buy things because their ego can't cope with it. How many times you heard somebody say, I wouldn't be seen dead in that? I wouldn't be seen dead wearing that. I wouldn't be seen dead driving that.
Yeah, yeah.
What is that about? That's about ego.
Do you live there? Do you live on that estate? Or one of those? Yeah.
Even people's postcodes as well.
Yeah.
Like some people love it. So I live on the outskirts of a town called Scunthorpe.
Yeah.
I know loads of people from Scunthorpe who go on holiday. When people ask them where they're from, they don't say Scunthorpe.
Oh wow.
They'll go, I'm from North Lincolnshire, or I'm from near Lincoln, or you're from Scunthorpe.
Yeah.
That's where you're from. But their ego doesn't want them to, doesn't want to reveal that. What? It's just a town.
Yeah.
It's like a postcard, but again, and I know other people who love it when they live in New York or London or Paris, do you know that, because of how that sounds?
Yeah.
And yet, the reality is they possibly don't live in any nicer place than someone who lives somewhere that's not as cool or fanciful as it, but it's ego stuff. So you can see people making loads of decisions.
Yeah.
And we're all guilty of making decisions driven by our ego rather than what we, like who we really are, what we really want, what's really right for us. If you think about being, and I think it's impossible to be completely ego-free, but if you think about being more ego-free, oh, what a brilliant way to live. And like how much easier life becomes when your ego isn't constantly chattering to you.
If that's the case, then how do we live more ego free? What do we need to do?
Well, I think the first port of call is to notice our ego and actually get to know it.
Yeah.
So notice how your ego behaves, notice what it says, notice what it's interested in. So you introduced me at the start, didn't you?
Yeah.
Coach, author, podcaster, blah, 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 whatever else you said, and ex-footballer, right?
Yeah.
What's really interesting is, years ago, the footballer thing would have proper fed my ego. I'd have been like, oh, yeah, footballer, yeah, ex-footballer. Do you know, the reality is I had a very short, not very successful professional football career before I fell into semi-professional football, right? Didn't really fulfill my potential in it at all. So in many ways, you could class that as a real failure on my behalf of I had more talent than the career that I actually created for myself. So you could see that as real failure, right? But that would still have fed my ego. And it feeds, people love it. People fucking love it. They're like, oh, footballer, he was a footballer. Do you know, like, they're excited by it.
And by you saying that.
Excited about being an electrician, do they?
No, but by you even saying that, people tend to, like, you'll come out and you say, I don't feel that comfortable or whatever. You have a self-doubt or whatever it is. And they'll try to feed it with, try to get you back with a narcissistical view of the ego to balance it out. Does that make sense?
No, go on, tell me more of it.
So you've got, like, you say you got your self-doubt, and that's part of ego. It's like, I can't do this because blah, 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 and you're telling yourself that. So rather than somebody would try to coach that out of you, they'll put a narcissistic approach of it, saying, but you're really good at that, and you're really good at this, and does that make sense?
And they'll feed your ego in a different way.
Yeah, trying to feed it back in the other way, like it's going to balance it, but it doesn't, does it? It's just keeping you in ego mode.
Yeah. So they're like, even stuff where when we're really bothered what like someone else thinks of the way we look. Do you know the whole like trying to get a beach body?
Yeah.
It's just ego.
Yeah.
Like I love it when somebody said years ago, they were like, I can tell you exactly how to get a beach body. And everyone was like, oh, go on then. And they were like, yeah, what you need is you need to find a beach and take your body to it. I fucking love it. I love it. It's right, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is.
This whole thing of like trying to get a beach body, trying to look like that, trying to be like them, trying to keep up with the Joneses. That's all promotion from the ego. And also protection from criticism of what will people think of me and all that, all that kind of stuff. We do that so much around our ego. And this is where people say, yeah, but you need your ego because your ego drives you on and pushes you forward. And I'm like, I think it drives you, personally, I think it drives you on and pushes you forward in all the wrong ways. Because the real you, like I don't know what to call it, true self, like who I really am, is creative and resourceful and wants to go and make some things happen in the world and make a difference and can do. So there's nothing about my true self that isn't ambitious. Yeah. Like I want to go and create some stuff, but I'm not hung up on that ambition because I have to have it or I have to achieve it for show or for other people or for that's ego. Yeah. Does that make sense? So by dropping your ego, you don't suddenly become this like floating around doing nothing person. You're still like living and embracing the moment and making things happen and like taking opportunities and all of that's still going on, but I think it's in a purer form and you're less hung up on the results of it or the.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. For me, it sometimes feels difficult sometimes to decide if it isn't my ego, this ideal self. It's a bit like the Rogers thing, ideal self, true self, the model he has. Of this, is it the ideal self or is this my true self? For example, I was coaching. I finished coaching somebody and I got feedback and it was really positive. and it made me feel really good. And I was thinking, what do I feel good about? I feel good that I've helped someone, that I've helped them change. But is it also my ego that's enjoying that? I don't know. How do you decipher it? How do you know fully what page you're on?
There's a challenge, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's a challenge there. So obviously I've written a couple of books, right? I've put them out, put a podcast out. So stuff I do is out there.
Yeah.
Right. And what's really interesting is the thought of doing a podcast initially, right? Very ego laced in the sense that I want to do a podcast because I think it can help people. So that's my true self. Like it's an extra resource for people that I work with and blah, blah, blah. It can help them. That's my true self. But my ego's also going, oh, this will make you look good. This will promote you. This will do that. But then the other part of my ego's also going, don't put that out. What if it's crap? People will hate it. Yeah. You'll look the right idiot. Does that make sense? So I've almost got three voices going on.
Okay.
I've got the real me going on, the promote part of my ego, and the protect part of my ego going on all at the same time. Mm-hmm. Now, there's nothing wrong with that happening, but I think the key is to notice that's happening and notice what each of those voices are saying, and then make a decision based on what's right for your true self, effectively. I don't think you can stop your ego chittering. I think it gets less as you go, but I'm certainly not ego-free by no stretch of the imagination at all, nowhere near. But I think what I have become over the last few years is more attuned to that ego voice. So I'm like, oh, there you are again, ego. Okay, I can hear you a little bit. So like, I might go do a talk at a conference, right?
Okay.
And before I go on, I might get like a little bit, like a bit of a nervous sweat. Do you know what I mean? Nothing major, but I might get sweaty palms, right? Which part of me is getting sweaty palms? That's the ego protect part of me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So my true self knows, because my true self wants to go on stage and try and say some things that might help somebody in the audience with something, right? That's it. And actually, my true self also knows that, like, the worst that happens is not really anything. Nothing really bad happens. The best that happens is, all right. My true self, what I'm trying to say is, my true self knows that however it goes, I'll handle it. It's all right.
Yeah.
So my true self has nothing to be nervous about. It's my ego protect self that's a bit like, oh, what if people think you're dead boring? What if it's crap? Yeah. What if people fall asleep? What if you get questions you can't handle? What if you look an idiot? Do you know, does that make sense?
Yeah.
But then the other part of me, my ego promote self, is kind of going, oh, people are going to love this. You're going to look amazing on there. It's going to be so good. It's going to be the best talk of the day and and all that. And that's not helpful as well. So it's almost this ability.
Blocks, aren't there?
Say again, sorry.
There are all these blocks, aren't there, that stop us doing stuff. Our ego is a big wall, isn't it? Like you were saying before, some people see it as it drives us forward. As you're talking, it feels like it's pulling us back and driving us forward.
Well, I think both. I think sometimes it drives us forward into stuff that we don't actually really want.
Yeah.
Stitches us up down paths we don't really want to go. We're going down those paths for other people or for culture or for what society says or blah, blah, blah. Or to look good or blah, blah, blah. Sometimes it holds us back from doing stuff we really do want to do because it's desperately trying to protect itself all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas I think your true self is like just really all right.
Okay.
Just really content, really happy, living in the moment. This is the other thing, is I don't think my ego lives in the moment at all. My ego's always thinking into the future or into the past.
Yeah.
Constantly looking out for like, oh, what could go wrong here? What do I need to protect myself from? Or where's an opportunity to promote myself? Or scolding me for like, you shouldn't have said that flipping thing you said. You're a right idiot. Do you know, like for past stuff? Whereas my true self, I think, is living much more...
Yeah, and
just here and now. Like, this is all right, isn't it?
With that, the future and the past are the two things that are anxiety, depression, and all these things live that we don't want, really, do we? Whereas when we're in the present, they don't really exist when we're fully present, do they? They're not really there. They're not, are they? So by noticing our ego, like you were saying before, to fully notice it. And I suppose you were kind of like saying, give it a voice so you can hear it. You can hear both
Yeah,
sides.
yeah.
You can hear all sides. Because maybe some people try to block it. Maybe I've done that in the past. To try to block those out and not giving the voice a chance to hear it. To go, actually, I'm not doing it for that, and that.
Yeah.
Really, I want to do it for this. My true self wants to do it for these reasons. Like you were saying about the podcast.
Yeah. I do think awareness is the key to it. I do think it's the key to it. And I don't know this. I don't know at all. But I do wonder how much our ego contributes to mental health issues.
Yeah.
I do wonder that.
Yeah.
I can't help but wonder that when I hear. I've spent a lot of time speaking with people with all sorts of different mental health conditions going on, and et cetera, et cetera. And the one time in my life when I struggled and didn't know I struggled at the time, but looking back on it was when my professional football career came to an end, when I was like 21 or something like that. And I ended up with, what's it called where you can't sleep? Insomnia.
Yeah.
Insomnia. Ended up with insomnia, but didn't even really realise why I'd got insomnia. But I had it, which I now know to be like a mental health condition, effectively.
Yeah.
And why did I have that? Because my ego couldn't cope with not being a footballer anymore.
Yeah.
I couldn't cope with it. Was lost, didn't really know what to do, was really struggling with it. So I do think there is a link between our ego and mental health conditions. I'm not suggesting that's completely true for everybody all the time. I don't know. It's speculation on my part. But a lot of the conversation I have with people around their mental health, and then if you start to look at it through the eyes of their ego, it looks like there's a link for me.
I think it is. You know, when we did it on your course and I felt uncomfortable, it's because it was affecting my mental health at the time and the place I was in, I think. So I totally agree. I think there is possibly to do with the mental health side is that ego being there, being completely present and not letting us be our true selves.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that's the complete reason, because obviously you've got factors like trauma and conditioning and other things that are in the mix. I'm not for a minute saying it's all to do with ego, but I do think there is a link there often. So I think it's a contributor.
I do. I feel that there's definitely 100% with that one. Brill, fantastic, mate. Just got time, 50 minutes. God, that's gone really quick, hasn't it?
Wow, that's gone really quick, mate. Yeah, really quick.
Just to kind of finish off, just to kind of see in society. A few questions of who do you see in society? I think you've already mentioned this, to have a big ego. So when you say they've got a big ego, who would you say that would be?
Do you know what I mentioned those male names before just to try and give people an impression. Yeah. But I think actually we've all got ego. Yeah. I think we've all got it, and I think it comes out in really different ways. Like I was saying, in different people, you'll see it, in completely different ways. So even people who are at times, the problem with ego is even when you're trying to be ego-free or trying to, you can then end up becoming quite egotistical about being ego-free. Do you know, like almost you can be a bit like, oh yeah, now look at me, I'm ego-free. Do you know,
this is why it's so difficult, because it's like entwined. It feels like when you think of it's not a nice thing, and like cancer, isn't it? It's like in everything. It's kind of ingrained in everything, isn't it? And that's why it's so difficult to kind of. Well, I don't think you will be able to remove it. Is to know it's where it is and what parts of you it's stuck in.
Yeah, and so much of our. So if you said to me who in society is got the biggest ego, well, I would say the whole of our consumer society, the whole of our consumer culture, because effectively marketing, I think, is all it's doing is marketing to our ego all the time. Yeah. Because basically, if you think about marketing, it's like, buy this thing, you'll be better. So that promotes your ego. Buy this thing, you'll be safe. That protects your ego. So effectively, when we're being marketed to all the time, what's being marketed to is not our true self, but our ego. So they play as adverts that go, hey, if you buy this car, you'll have this lifestyle. Use this on your skin and everyone, you'll look like this model. Do you know, like, wear these type of clothes and you'll be one of the cool kids. Do you know, it's that kind of feel to it all the time. So it's constantly feeding our egos from a protect or a promote way all the time. So it's quite difficult in our culture to escape it because it's being fed. And effectively, people talk about it's sex that sells. It's actually ego that sells, or it's certainly ego that buys.
Yeah.
If you can appeal to somebody's ego, they, more often than not, will buy your thing because you've kind of manipulated them in a way and fed their ego that goes, oh, yeah, I've got to have that so that I kind of look like this, or I look that, or I'm this, or I'm that, or the other. And our ego genuinely believes that some stuff's miles better than other stuff, even when it probably isn't. It's just a brand. But even supporting football teams, mate.
Yeah.
Think about why do people who live in Kent support Manchester City? Why?
Because they win, don't they?
Because they win. It feeds your ego and it's shared glory and all that kind of stuff. Some people who live in Kent might well have deep-rooted connections to Manchester, so that's not nothing against Kent and nothing against anyone who supports Man City.
No.
But as an example, why would that happen? Why would somebody who lives in Devon, why are they not supporting Plymouth rather than Liverpool? Do you know, like, that makes no sense. But the reason they're doing it is because it's an ego. It feeds your ego. Saying you're a Liverpool fan feeds your ego miles more than saying you're a Plymouth Argyle fan. That's the truth. So even that can be a kind of ego decision. You can see it all over. You can see it all over the place, and a lot of it's about what's marketed to us. Constantly. Why do people come back from holidays and, where have you been? Oh, I've been to LA. Do you know, like, why is that a bigger deal than coming back and saying I've been to Bognor Regis?
Yeah.
Why are we bothered? Well, because LA has been marketed like this amazing, exotic, kind of happening, cool place, and it feeds our ego.
And in reality, the holiday wasn't probably that great, was it? It was a bit of a rubbish holiday, but they're coming back saying, oh, well, hey, this amazing place, and people will then be, like, impressed.
Exactly. It's ego stuff. I mean, you might want to go to LA because you just want to explore it and see it, but no problems with that. But why is one better than the other? It's because it's been promoted in that way. It's kind of feeds our ego. And why do we say it? Because we say it in that way as well, don't we? We go, I've just been to Bognor. Or you'd be like, I've been to LA. Do you know, like, it's got a real... Do you know what I mean? It's kind of got a real difference to it, and that's ego stuff. But we are constantly marketed to, mate. Constantly. Yeah. And we make decisions based on that. So the biggest ego in society is probably the marketing, not a person.
So it is,
probably the marketing.
But it's clever, isn't it? Because they're making money out of that, aren't they?
But they are, but it causes a problem because then our egos are constantly being fed, and even wider, like, I'm not being funny, like, people buy boxer shorts because David Beckham's on an advert wearing those boxer shorts. What on earth's going on? What's going on is that somehow our ego goes, oh, if I buy those boxer shorts, that'll promote me to the level of David Beckham. I'll be similar to Beckham, so I'll have a similar lifestyle and a similar this and and they don't even want a similar lifestyle to Beckham. What they want is a similar lifestyle to what's being portrayed as his lifestyle. Because what's portrayed as his lifestyle isn't his lifestyle, is it? You just see the highlights, the good bits, the edited parts, effectively. So even in that, there's a whole load of, like, promotion of ego stuff going on, and we go buy them boxer shorts. It's ridiculous because there's just, you know what I mean? We go buy them because it feeds our ego, effectively. So it's very difficult to step away from it because we're constantly being fed.
And our ego's never happy, is it? So you're never going to achieve happiness. It's never content, is it? It's just
no. Yeah, that's it. Never promote itself enough. Can never protect itself enough. So it's this constant, ongoing unfulfillment from where is your true
battle,
self.
Isn't it? It's just a battle you can never win.
You can never win now. Whereas it's like an unwinnable game. It's like Jumanji. Whereas your true self, is just really happy. I think naturally just content, okay with what is, really accepting.
How often are you personally, John, how often are you in your true self then, do you think?
Well, I think it's this constant movement, Lee, between true self, promoted ego, protected it. There's that movement there. But I think more and more and more, I'm certainly making decisions from my true self.
Yeah.
Not always,
yeah,
but definitely my decision making, the choices that I'm making in life. The truth is, you asked me what my greatest achievement was early on in this podcast. I said my marriage. If we'd have operated our marriage from our ego state, we would be divorced now. Wow. It's only our true selves that have kept us together and in that marriage, because our egos would have got so, like, you see this in marriages, like it's all like me, you've done this and you've done that and and that's a nightmare stuff. Like, you're just heading for breakdown a relationship there. Whereas your true self is able to see the other person and properly see the other person, and have shared boundaries and shared needs with the other person. So it's not about you and I and me, which is your ego. It's about us. And that's where I think your true self is collaborative and your ego is competitive. So your ego's constantly competing with other people, whereas your true self's just collaborating. And that's where I think in our marriage, it's our true selves and collaboration that's made it work. If we'd have been competing, and people do compete with their partners, unbelievably compete with them and come from an ego place, and I don't think you can establish a quality relationship. No. Certainly not a long-lasting one from that place.
I think that's huge
loads in this, man.
I reckon there's a few people, when they listen to this, hear that, and they might be struggling with a marriage. So just to finish on then, just on that point, I think that's, with it being your biggest achievement as well, and it's such a good achievement as well, I love that. What advice would you give around that? So when you do get to that stage, so I'm still guessing you still have arguments. Or do you?
We have disagreements, definitely. Yeah. We certainly don't have slanging matches and throwing things at each other or anything of that ilk at all. But we do have disagreements, yes, definitely.
And how do you deal with them? What do you do? What do you both do to make that work then?
The disagreement or the marriage in general?
Both. Feels like maybe disagreements end up being this negative environment for some couples, and they do break up due to that.
Well, for starters, nothing's a deal breaker. So what I mean is we have the solidity and the boundaries, if you like, that we're in this, we're committed. Yeah. So we're not worried about having a conversation, a difficult conversation that might mean that this is too fragile to handle it. So we've got that commitment from each other. So that's the context of that is really important, isn't it? Because we can have more difficult conversations with people that we're more closely connected with and more solid with, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's key. But I think the other thing is being able to understand that we all see the world differently at times. Yeah. And that's okay that we see it differently. There isn't you're right, I'm wrong, because that's ego. Like, one of the biggest things I learned about my ego is my ego has to be right. Yeah. Has to be right. Yeah. And I, honestly, mate, I almost cringily embarrassed about the hours I've spent arguing with people for no other reason than my ego needs to be right. Yeah. I need to prove my ego right. It's pathetic. So I'd be having conversations with people when I was younger with no intention of learning from them, just wanting to prove myself to be right. Ego stuff. And I think what's really important then in those disagreements is I don't need to be right. When I'm disagreeing with my wife, I don't have to be right. All we have to do is find a way forward from that.
I love that. That's great.
The other thing as well is it'll be your ego that struggles to apologise and say sorry. My true self has no problems with saying sorry at all. Not at all. If I'm wrong and I know that I could have done something better, I'm more than happy to apologise. I've got no problems at all with that. And I'm the same with my kids. Yeah. I've apologised to my kids since they were born for certain things that I know I could have got better as a parent, and certain decisions I've made, or maybe when I've been too harsh with them, or maybe when I've not supported them or listened to them enough, or I will say sorry to them. I've got no problems with that at all. But our ego stops us from saying sorry. So I think our ego damages relationships in that way.
That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? And I love how you brought the kids in there as well, because we sometimes, you hear it sometimes, like we're above children being adults.
Yeah, no. I mean,
totally disagree
I'm above
with
them
that,
in terms of, if we're making family decisions or
Yeah,
safety decisions or,
yeah,
do you know,
of
like
course,
that,
yeah.
then absolutely there's a hierarchy
Yeah.
in who's making the decision sense. But I'm not above them as a human being.
No.
And they deserve to see as well. This is the other thing is, they deserve to see and have modelled to them, there's a grown-up who's got something wrong and is prepared to apologise and put it right. That's great, isn't it? The last thing they need is grown-ups who
huge.
won't apologise and won't admit when they're wrong. What a horrible example for them of being a grown-up. So, I've got no problems with that. But I can only do that by stepping away from my ego. Because my ego doesn't want to be wrong. Whereas my true self's really all right with my failings, my flaws, my struggles, messing up. Or it's like John C. Maxwell talks about failing forward, didn't he? And I love that. Yeah. Failing forward, which is the idea that you use failure as just a stepping stone, a learning thing.
Although I do really love that. And you used that with your football, didn't you?
Yeah.
It was massive for you, just talking before and just like, the William Bridges stuff, that transition stuff, it's kind of the ending brought on the person you are now, isn't it? Is who you are as a person. Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, John. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you again. For me personally, I've learnt quite a bit. I always do from you. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome, Lee. Do you know what'd be really interesting, mate? Is seeing when you put this podcast out, what your ego does when you put it out.
Yeah, definitely.
It'd be really interesting, won't it, to see if your ego's going, oh, hope it goes well, don't put it out, blah, blah. Or your ego's going, oh, this will be amazing, I'll get loads of likes for this one, and blah, blah. Or whether you can just put it out there and let it do whatever it does and let it be okay, whether people like it or don't like it, or...
I think it's the other side for me. Yeah. My ego usually goes the other way. It's more like, oh, yeah, but you're great. But it's definitely there. And I've made my first one. I've still not put it out. It was like quite a bit ago. But that's going out, and then this will probably go out a few weeks' time. But
brilliant, mate.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this today. So thank you so much, John.
Thank you, mate. Been
Great
a pleasure.
Stuff. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Back again in a month's time with a new guest. Thank you very much. See you now.